Welcome to the Credit and Collection News Podcast. We are really lucky today to go ahead and start a new podcast theory or story all about what's hot in the credit and collection news. On the actual newsletter itself that's coming out every day. We picked a bunch of top articles, and then we grabbed some experts from the industry to chat with us about those articles and what's going on. The two hot topics in November were the CFPB, no surprise there, what's going on with them. And the other topic that we're going to talk about is artificial intelligence, which again is another hot item that's going on that we're going to do. There was at least 10 articles on the CFPB, about 5 articles on artificial intelligence. We're going to kind of delve into each of those and talk about it. I do want to introduce our guests for the day that'll be talking with us. First on the list is Stephanie Jackman, who's a partner with Troutman Pepper Locke. Stephanie has also done podcasts with us in the past. She's well known throughout the industry, has been in the industry a long time. So welcome, Stephanie.
Glad to be here.
Yes, glad to have you. Also on board with us is Joanne Needleman. Joanne is with Clark Hill, a member and leader of their financial services group. Again, another staple in the credit and collections industry, has been around for a while. I don't throw years in there. I just say it's been around for a while.
Don't use the OLD word either.
Yeah. No. So welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
Also with us is John McNamara. John, who has also been around the industry. I'll say he's old, like I am, because I can do that. But he's formerly the assistant director at the CFPB. He's was there for 11 years. He's now the chief growth officer with Avtal. So we'll get to talk a lot with John as well, because he's certainly got a lot of opinions and stuff that now can be expressed because he's no longer with the CFPB to do that. So welcome, John.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. And just let's set the record straight. The only old we're going to talk about here is OALD.
I like that. Okay. I like that a lot. And our fourth panelist is Rob Graffith. He's the head of business development with CSS Impact, who's also been with operations and programming. So definitely there for input and what's happening from the industry, as well as CSS Impact is the sponsor for our Credit and Collection News podcast. So we've got Rob with her. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very, very excited to be here with all these superstars. I'm humbled by the great presence of Stephanie, Joanne, and John. I'll be your tech guy. Developer at heart. Been managing developers and talking about these AI articles.
So let's hit the CFPB. There's always on credit and collection news. There's always lots of articles going on with the CFPB, but the CFPB's clicks definitely jumped this past month, and there's a couple of headlines that certainly got my attention, and it got the readers' intentions as well, and just talking about it, there is a potentially new leader coming to the CFPB because Trump nominated Stuart Levenbach as the new CFPB director. But is that because we want to keep Vogt in charge, or is it because there's other issues that are going on? And some of the other top headlines kind of underscore that, meaning that the CFPB is transferring its caseload to the DOJ. Is the funding suddenly running out, or has it run out on the CFPB? There's all sorts of articles and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of just open it up to the group to talk about the CFPB, what they've kind of been seeing this past month, that suddenly all these articles are coming out and they're talking about it, and where the CFPB is going. And I'm going to go ahead and one of the articles that we actually ran in there was written by Stephanie and a couple of her cohorts, that made the top of the headline news, especially on the clicks. So Stephanie, I'm going to just kind of open it up to you to get us started, and then let's talk a little bit about the CFPB, where it's going, what we think, and what we hope for the CFPB, and what's going to happen.
Well, thanks. And I definitely appreciate getting to kick it off, but I'm excited to hear what everyone else has to say as well, because it's been a big year, right? There's been a lot happening as we were getting ready to start talking. I was saying I'm surprised I had an article that got a lot of clicks because I don't feel like I've had time to write a lot of them this year. But as far as the nomination for director, I am also of the mindset that that's more about keeping the acting director in his current role. I believe under the Vacancies Act, and I do not purport to be an expert, but I believe this tolls the time while the nomination's pending. If the nomination is not ultimately confirmed by Congress, then the acting director would have, I think it's another 210 days. That's the part I'm saying, don't quote me on. Oh, good. I see Mr. McNamara nodding. That gives me, I skipped that class, I won't say how many years ago, but the Vacancies Act class in law school, but been learning about it. He doesn't have any background in consumer financial services. To me, it's a placeholder. I think that Mr. Levenbach may have other things in the administration that he does, but right now it's similar to what we saw with McKernan some time ago, of just trying to buy some time. As far as the funding situation, we were all chatting. We'll see what's going on back and forth. We saw the position of the Department of Justice that the acting director was expressing in the ongoing litigation in the DC courts relating to the efforts to reduce staff at the CFPB, saying that the Fed has not been profitable, depending on how that term's defined, because that's what that whole argument is about, coming after the CFSA decision. I had the opportunity to make it myself in a matter. It was not decided before the matter was dismissed under the new administration. But the idea there is that if there's no profits, then the funding, the CFPB shouldn't have had any funding since I think it's September of 2022. But then last week, a new article came out that was talking about an expectation, as Joanne pointed out when we were prepping, expectation that there would be profitability in the new year. That we'll see if that happens or not. But I think, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but given kind of our initial discussion, I think all of us understand and appreciate that deciding there was no funding would be very disruptive in a long-term way. So that could be interesting if that's the direction that goes. If it turns out that there has been funding, then so be it, because most of the things that were being done from 2022 to 2024, when there was, or 2025, I should say, allegedly or arguably no funding, depending on which side of that argument you come down on, a lot of them have been undone anyway through dismissals and other activities that the CFPB and the current administration have been focused on since the election. And then you said, what do we hope for the future? I've said this for a while and I'll say it again. I hope for more consistency with the CFPB. A lot of people act as the CFPB going away. And I continue to remind people that the Dodd-Frank Act, which was passed by Congress in 2009, as I recall, created the CFPB. So only Congress can get rid of the CFPB, erase it as an agency. That doesn't mean that we can't see volatility in how it's run by the leaders and each incoming administration. And frankly, that's really been its legacy so far, from when it was initially stood up in 2011 to today, have been really big pendulum swings that are getting bigger, right? So the shift from Director Cordray to Director Kraninger, there were big shifts. I feel like there was a less public nature of it, less, maybe that's not the right way to frame it or phrase it, but less grandiosity in the way it was discussed and presented. But there also was less going on in the public realm, right? If you think about it, the CFPB had a few public litigation matters, but for the most part, exams were going on behind the scenes, consent orders were coming out. Director Kraninger took over during the first Trump administration, and actually at the end of her tenure had issued more consent orders, or I'm sorry, enforcement CIDs than Director Cordray, but it felt different, right? Then we swing back under Director Chopra, and there's been a lot more. There've been a lot of developments. The director is fireable for at will. That litigation had resolved the PHH matter. We'd had some contentious elections. I would say that the CFPB had become, at least in my view, a bit more politicized and aligned with the administration that was in place at the time. And now that's what we're seeing again. But in my personal view, that isn't the role of what is supposed to be an independent agency that is supposed to be giving guidance to a critical piece of our economic infrastructure, not just in the United States, but worldwide. And so I continue to hope and continue to be disappointed that there will actually be a bill that is enacted that just creates some, whether it's a 5-person commission like we have at other,
Bipartisan committee.
yeah, whether it's something like that or something different with funding that's just bringing some clarity, because it's really difficult to say for 4 years it's going to be this, and then for 4 years it's going to be that, and then for it that's not good for anybody, industry or consumers or the role of the regulator.
Exactly.
Steve, if I could jump in, there's really nothing that Stephanie said that I disagree with. Circling back on Stuart Levenbach's role, since Trump was elected in the 2016 general election, I think he's had like 7 different roles within the Trump administration. I'm 100%. My highly informed opinion is he's a placeholder. This happened when Jonathan McKernan withdrew his nomination. And you may recall the Thursday before Easter, Russell Vogt or some of Elon Musk's people fired like 1,500 of the 1,700 people at the Bureau. That was ruled at the time. That was the union sued. The CFPB Employees Association sued, and they were all rehired like the next day. So, and then shortly thereafter, Jonathan McKernan, who I think is a serious policymaker, withdrew his nomination. And he's at Treasury now. But yeah, if Stewart withdraws his nomination or isn't not nominated, basically Russell Vogt would have another 210 days to run the show. Yeah, the latest hottest news is wait a minute, the Fed now makes money. And the November numbers, I think, indicate the Fed made about $600 million. But by rule, they have to basically apply all of that against what's called a deferred asset. So the Fed doesn't lose money, but what it does is it sends the Treasury an IOU called a deferred asset. And that deferred asset was like $243.8 billion. And I think by statute, and I'm not an attorney, although I am lucky enough to hang with some really smart ones now and then. By statute, that has to be paid off before the Fed would make money. But getting back to sort of even talking about that gives sort of air to this really ridiculous argument that if the Fed doesn't make money, I mean, this argument is so ridiculous that Ken Paxton, the AG in Texas, who, Steve, he spoke at one of your events and just broadly disparaged the Bureau up one side and down the other. And I think he was lighting candles, black candles, that the CFSA would prevail in the Supreme Court ruling. Even he thinks that thing doesn't hold water. So I really doubt that will happen. And then one thing I want to make sure, having just left the Bureau this July and having many, many dear friends there, some of the best people I'm likely to ever meet, there's still probably about 1,350 employees at the CFPB. They are still likely, the enforcement's not doing much, supervision's doing next to nothing, but they have these tools. And, I think Mark Paletta, who is one of the deputies for Russell Vogt, has said, they'll go after egregious actors, and they do care about FDCPA and FCRA. So don't assume the cop is going away. And regarding like this again, this argument that even Ken Paxton doesn't agree with, that the Bureau basically was unlawfully funded because the Fed was losing money. I mean, to Stephanie's point, that means unwinding lots and lots of things. As far as the crazy swings go at the Bureau, I give Rohit Chopra and his senior lead deputies, he had 3 or 4 people that were in, that from whom he took counsel. I give them a lot of credit for the backlash against the CFPB, the Congress's act to cut funding by 46.5%, also the attempts by Elon Musk and then later maybe Russell Vogt to close the Bureau as a pendulum swing. And what we're seeing now is policy, I'd call it performative art policy, where the policy set is actually almost like a performance. It's not durable. It gets wiped away really easily. Almost everything Rohit did was wiped away in the early days of the new leadership. It was non-durable policy, and it seemed to be more signaling and rhetoric, and it was extreme. Now, this is what really scares me, is Russell Vogt sort of is continuing that. It's a very much performative art to say, I'm going to close the Bureau, when Russell Vogt's not a dumb guy. He knows Congress is only has the authority to close it. Now, what he could do, and I've been predicting hopefully for a long time, the Bureau would use the budget that it has, which is roughly half of what was once there. And it tries to have maybe 600, 650, 700 staffers to do serious policy work. And some of the politicals who are at the Bureau now are actually serious policy people. But the signaling from Russell Vogt, even though one of his deputies in a court filing said they weren't closing the Bureau on Charlie Kirk's podcast when he said he was going to close it, that makes me feel like the 600 or 700 is going to be 200 plus. So when they fired everybody but 200, the union sued. They had to hire everybody back. But also, people went on record to say 200 people can't get the statutory work that the Bureau has that is accountable for, get it done. So I think it'll be 200 plus 50 or so to essentially check the box to get that statutory work done. And then I'm going to wind this up really quickly, but here's a great, and Rob, this is for you. Here's a great AI assignment for everybody. Take Title 10 of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, and initially ask it to upload that doc, ask it to tell you how many times the word shall is in that document, and then how many times the word must is in that document. And then you can refine it from there. But we really quickly get to the fact that Congress didn't put a whole lot of shalls and must in Dodd-Frank. And if you're taking a really hardcore statutory look at the Bureau and say, we're just going to do what Congress said we should do, I think you focus on those shalls. And then I'm going to just wrap it up because I know I've rambled a bit. Could not agree more with Stephanie that Cordray was a serious policy guy, and he enacted durable rulemaking. Kathy Craniger was a serious policy woman. She enacted things like Reg F. Okay, that started under Cordray, finished under Kathy, and that is a durable rule. There was less rhetoric and signaling around advisory opinions and things like that, and I think more serious policy. And then it seemed to be more about the headlines under Rohit, and certainly that continues under Russell Vogt. And here's the scariest thing for everybody. We had one pendulum swing way over here with Rohit. We've got another one way over here with Russell Vogt. And if the Bureau's cut to 200 people, when there's a change in the administration, there are going to be a lot of people that want to come back in a wampin' and a wampin', like Slim Pickens and Blazing Saddles. And the other thing is, if the Bureau is cut to 250 people, the only way to staff it back quickly would be as many politicals as possible and as many fellows as possible. And those folks are likely to be, in my experience, many of the fellows were, in their thinking and actions sometimes, were not unlike political appointees. They weren't career staffers.
And to answer your question, John, 1,190.
And then start finishing from there, because some of them are used on the same thing. But there aren't many shalls around supervision.
Or enforcement.
Yeah. Much of what the Bureau, I still say we sometimes, much of what the Bureau does is highly discretionary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Joanne, so I'm gonna go ahead and I was just gonna say, I'm gonna turn this over to Joanne for her comments, but it's tough to follow Blazing
It's
Saddles.
it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's-
How do you beat
Absolutely.
I bet nobody saw that coming.
Well, I've never heard the CFPB and Blazing Saddles used in the same sentence before.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's a good analogy, John. I don't have a lot more to add because I think that Stephanie and John have hit the whole key points, but a couple things I do want to point out. I think from a perspective of how we advise our clients, I'm not going to tell you exactly what I say to my clients, nor I'm going to tell you who my clients are, but the most difficult thing for me the last 12 months or since the election is trying to advise my clients about what to do. I mean, I make a joke. I speak a lot with our dear friend Manny Newberger all the time, and I make a joke that there's not enough Tylenol and ibuprofen around for me to deal with what's going on with the Bureau on a given day, because one day I'm hearing we're not going to supervise anymore. The next day I'm hearing, or there's no more money. And the next day I'm getting an alert that we're going to do supervision and we have to do a humility pledge. I mean, it is just, I think for me, I'm trying to figure out where the adults in the room are. And I think that's a really Pollyanna perspective, but I've become so frustrated with the childish behavior of not only what the CFPB was last year under Rohit, which was ridiculous. And I heard from John and others who were, career and wonderful, as Mick Mulvaney would say, bureaucrats. And I don't say that in a disparaging way. You had a job to do and you did it. And I know it was very difficult to do last year. This year, there are still people who want to do their job, but they're being prevented from doing it. We have a agency, and I'm going to say every folks on the phone, and I'm sure a lot of our on the webinar, and a lot of our debt collection members maybe would disagree with me. We absolutely need a regulator for non-bank entities. 100%. Ask the mortgage industry right now. They're like ripping their hair out right now about what we should be doing. They have spent billions, and I mean billions, in setting up TILA and RESPA. And, for the Bureau to all of a sudden go away, where's the HMDA data going? How are we going to start setting adjusted rates for mortgages? I mean, it is ridiculous. And I lay the blame on all the directors of the CFPB, except for Kathy Kraninger, of course, the woman who ran the CFPB ran it the best. I'll just put it out there. But I blame it on Congress, and I blame it on all the politicos who are sitting on both sides of the aisle that have come into the Bureau. You don't see this at the FTC. Granted, Lena Khan was somewhat of an outlier, but for the most part, irrespective of who is in the administration, the FTC has been consistent. You could have Obama, you could have Trump. They did what they did, and did their work, and they put their head to the ground. And you have career people at the FTC, which is really important. I think one of the biggest issues I see both with the CFPB and many other agencies right now is the brain drain that is going on. Who are the experts? You have someone like John McNamara who's worked in the industry for years. Who's the next John McNamara that's going to come into the CFPB and give the Bureau, you talk about policy, who's really going to give them informed policy and informed facts to form those policy decisions? So, I mean, I think we're going into a very dangerous area with this particular Bureau. So I'm just really frustrated by that. And it's really hard for me to advise my clients about what to do, and to convince them that there's certain paths that they need to stay on. When you talk about Dodd-Frank and what Dodd-Frank authorizes the Bureau to do, John is correct. It's pretty high level. It's pretty discretionary. When I saw the article and the announcement that all enforcement was moving over to DOJ, I wasn't surprised by that, because it is very unusual to have a bureau to have an agency that actually litigates where there has been no mandate within the statute that allows them to do it. All the Dodd-Frank says to the CFPB is that you can enforce. And we see, and Stephanie knows this because she's had tremendous experience in doing these types of investigations. When the Bureau investigates you, they say, all right, we've done our investigation. Now we're going to refer to enforcement. That's really to decide whether there should be a consent order. The litigation aspect should always go to the DOJ. I mean, CFPB, there's nothing in Dodd-Frank that says the CFPB files a lawsuit against you, because most agencies refer their actions to the DOJ. So some of the things, I remind some of our folks on this webinar and on this podcast, some of the things that the Bureau did, they did on their own. I mean, they just made the decision, here's how we're going to how we're going to exercise our authority. It wasn't necessarily mandated. So I wouldn't be shocked sometimes when you see something where the Bureau is making a correction. And I think in a lot of ways, Russell Vogt is doing that. I'm not necessarily saying that I agree with it, but in putting enforcement in the DOJ is really what should have been done from the beginning. And the Bureau just basically puts their case together. They are, kind of like the FBI. They put all the facts and the information together, and then when the time comes, they refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's really what the CFPB should have done with enforcement. But they went and started to enforce. And how did that work out, Stephanie? Not great a lot of times. Whenever I've lived it, you've lived it. The bright people at the Bureau, I'm not going to take anything away from that. Were they really good litigators? I'm not so sure. Ask Waltman Weinberg how that worked out for the CFPB, because it didn't work out well. So I think that there's a real critical look at what the actual authorities of the CFPB are going to be. That potentially is a good thing. But I agree with John. I mean, we are looking at, if there is a change of administration, I think the next person that comes to the CFPB is going to make Rohit Chopra look like a choir boy.
Wait, Joanne, I couldn't agree with you more on everything you said, but the enforcement piece in particular, what I saw in my time with the CFPB, or in working with the CFPB, we didn't often end up in litigation. So that's why I don't want to say litigating, but in the enforcement arm, is I saw that in parallel with the examination arm, saw a lot of the same things being raised, but it sometimes felt like it was targeted towards industries that leadership, whether that's, whoever was in the White House, or I don't necessarily mean the director, but just whoever was in charge of policy just didn't like. And I get that. But what I would see is a behavior in one segment of a disliked industry or a huge player was approached one way here in investigations, but a different way in an exam where it had real monetary differences too, right? Like remediating anything you need to change to avoid to continue doing it. There's cost involved in that. But usually in exams, you weren't seeing, money going back out the door. You certainly didn't have penalties. And there was a certain inherent unfairness to it. And there was nothing to align against. Like to your point about counseling our clients. What does it mean to do this or to do that? What is the threshold that will or will not be enough? Companies need clear guidance, as clear as they can. John, I heard you speaking for many years when you were in your role at the Bureau, talking about, and I truly thought, working to get data and information from both sides of the aisle, right? Consumers and industry, to try to put together guidance. And I'll tell you, because I know you were really involved in Reg F in different ways. Reg F is good guidance. It's not perfect, right? I'm sure nobody got everything. That's just the way it is.
She's got something.
There's at least, we know that we can use email and text. We know that that's okay.
That was absolutely a passion of mine, was to make sure that digital communications came into that. And
yeah,
frankly, we listened to industry. So when we issued I think it was the SBREFA outline, we mentioned, and we watched what happened in New York State, where they clearly anticipated, the rulemakers anticipated digital comms, but the application through the rule was unworkable. So we heard from industry that, hey, Sabrifa didn't talk enough about that. So we were very explicit. And yeah, that was like 3 years of my life, maybe 4 years of my life at the Bureau. And that's why I came in the first place, was specifically to work on Reg F. One thing that I do want to say, though, I want to defend some, but not all of the enforcement actions. We have really good enforcement attorneys. And there's some cases, I can't tell you how many collection law firms have come up to me after a couple of our notable cases, not Weltman. And I think Weltman's not so much a factor of bad attorneys on the Bureau's part as the fact that I think Weltman is a solid organization. I have no fiduciary relationship with them. They don't owe me money, nor do I owe them. But I mean, I don't think that was a great case. But in some of the others, I can't tell you how many collection law firms have thanked me for some of our enforcement actions, because it drove a practice where creditors gave their collection attorneys original account level documents. The only old we're going to talk about today, Steve. I just
Yeah,
want to make
but that, John, that begs the question: where in the FDCPA does it that was the problem with enforcement? And Stephanie and I have talked about this for years. It's one thing if you want to enforce if you have violated the law, but if you are going to enforce to create law, that's the role of Congress.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest problem of the Bureau. And states have now adopted this regulation by enforcement. You can't do that. And from attorneys like myself and Stephanie, who have to advise and make recommendations to our clients, I've got the statute. I'm looking at my Dodd-Frank right here, but
Sure.
I look at statutes. I look at what laws have been enacted. That's how I guide my clients. I can't say to them, well, but if an enforcement attorney comes in and looks at it a different way because they don't like your industry, that's not the law. And that's
Absolutely.
been the biggest problem. And that was the
Unfortunately-
biggest problem, that we dealt with in the last decade with the Bureau.
Right. And you and both you and Stephanie are making a real good case about inconsistencies within the enforcement division of one regulator, which could spiral out to the enforcement divisions of FTC, whatever's left of the CFPB, plus numerous states.
We're seeing that now.
The politicals, a lot of the politicals and a lot of the people that I consider extreme are at the states now. And you mentioned something earlier about, and thank you for the kind words. Like, yeah, I came to the Bureau, took a pay cut to work on Reg F because I happen to have a lot of subject matter expertise in debt collections. But like, people are policy. And after what's going on now at the CFPB, I mean, who would want to do that? Who would want to subject themselves to this kind of crazy train? By the way, I'm a big fan of Evan Weinberger. He's a reporter for Bloomberg. He just did a piece today on the fact that Russell votes challenging the collective bargaining agreement unit or agreement for the CFPB members. So if you still work there, you're getting these indignities every single day, even though you weren't a political. You might have been a really good attorney. You might have been, mainstream. You might have, again, by no means agreed with most. And I would say this: most career staff when I was there did not agree with Rohit. Like, that was different.
Oh.
I mean, we argued with Kathy sometimes, we argued with Rich sometimes, but we generally sort of appreciated and liked and respected them. But like cutting benefits that they thought they had, like there's a tiny bonus for CFPB employees. It's like 2 or 3%. The raise, I think all those things are being stripped away. So it's sort of like one damn thing after another for the folks who are there. And anybody watching goes, okay, I would have to be crazy to want to subject myself to that kind of environment ever again.
Even when the next administration comes in, right? Like that,
Right.
that is one of these easy come, easy go sort of situations. If you have, single chairman that's appointed, you have this novel funding mechanism, all of these novelties that kind of go around the original formation of the CFPB, that just kind of by virtue of that sort of, well, we want to be able to put this in place and have us be in control of it. One party wanted to be in control. Just made it easy for the opposing party, when they come into power, to just pull the plug. And then next thing you know, next one comes in, plugs it all back in tenfold.
Yeah, Rob, you're touching on my next passion. So if my health is good, when there is a change in administration, I want to pull every string to get a political appointment, a Schedule C employee, to come to the Bureau and be a stick in the mud, a stick right in the middle of the mud, like urging reconciliation, or urging no extreme. Let's stay in the middle. It's just good damned business, right? How do you run a business when we're going to go through these cycles? And so the worst is yet to come. Again, I don't know how a Democratic administration would respond to what's gone at the Bureau recently.
We want it to be reasonable and stable, right? Stability,
Right.
predictability. We just want
Well, that-
we want a
that
level
makes-
playing.
They won't. But that's
That-
again, there's no adults in the room to do that. That's the big
Right.
There's greatest compliment we used to get is occasionally industry would refer to me, sometimes Tom Paul, Laura Eudes, some of the folks as the adults in the room.
Right.
Right. If well, I'll throw this out here before we change topics to do this. If the CFPB were to become run by a commission like the FTC and other regulatory agencies, would that change or add to the stability of the CFPB so that some of these major swings going back and forth would dissipate and do that? And this is, again, this is just your opinion, but if they were to go to it, I don't know if it'd ever be able to be created, because if you're in charge, why would you want to have a commission when you can just have your one guy doing exactly what you want, or gal, as opposed to doing that? But the reality is, if you really want something with stability, because I know when Stephanie first started talking, you talked about the FTC and how stable they have been throughout this whole, because they're enforcers. They're enforcers of the rules. You understand what you're doing if the FTC comes in to you and says, "Hey, by the way, you're not following the law, and we're here to fix that." You know where you stand. So it can't change. Would a commission at the CFPB change all that? And I'm going to throw that out there and let you guys talk.
I mean, it's not a committee of the FTC. I mean, we have to work through. I guess the Supreme Court has to weigh in on this, and I'll let the attorneys talk about it more. But we have a commission now with FTC has two, or is it two? Just
I think
the
it's
Democratic commissioners have been fired. So so the commission. I think a commission. And I think many very consumer advocate leaning career staffers at the Bureau, up until the FTC commissioners were fired, would have said a commission would have been a great way to go. Because again, Rohit showed us that if you have a director that wants to do extreme things, he or she can do them. And in that regard, he was very different from Cordray and very different from Kathy Craniger.
Well, I think, John, you raise another question, and it kind of conflicts with what Steve's saying. So should we have a commission? I think a year ago, we would all say, sure, but now we're seeing the whole we're seeing the whole administrative process being challenged. So if we were in a situation where we didn't have an administration that wants to tear down the whole administrative state, sure, commissions would be great. But, now we have this whole idea of how should agencies be run to begin with. So I think it's putting the administration aside and just looking at the Administrative Procedures Act and just looking how agencies should run. Yes, to answer your question, I think a commission would be a great start with the CFPB, a great start. I also think that Dodd-Frank needs to be revised a little bit. It's been a decade to really, we've had this kind of CFPB experiment for 11 years. I think there needs to be some tweaks to it. And have more clarity as to what the CFPB can and cannot do from a statutory basis, and not to the point that we've all made, to the whim of the director, to the whim of misinterpretations of what the CFPB from what has been said in Dodd-Frank. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I think a commission is a first start. But again, I'm going to go back to my theme. If there were adults in the room that really cared about consumers, they wouldn't run the Bureau this way.
Sort of hand in hand with commission, I still am leery of a strict congressional appropriation, and I know that won't be a popular opinion, but I mean, the House Financial Services Committee, those financial committees are sort of known as money committees, and that they are the targets of a great deal of money and lobbying. So trying to isolate some of that from the ability of the regulated entities to influence, I think that's not a bad thing. But again, I couldn't agree more with Joanne, because like talking about a commission now seems sort of frivolous because we don't know how this will settle out.
Stephanie, any comments before we change topics?
I agree with what's being said. I agree, especially with Joanne, that in what we're accustomed to, where your commission structure is still intact, and spots are filled with, some regularity and not prolonged absences, and you don't have litigation about whether people can be reappointed and all things like that, that a commission structure makes sense. Um, I I I still would like to see some stronger signaling that they're going that way, because 8 years ago, we didn't see it then either, right? And we weren't necessarily in the tear down the administrative state mindset. Um maybe I'd like to just see some thought out of the current administration and Congress about what direction to go, right? So if what we're doing is reducing the administrative state, and that means they want to transfer, like they're doing, certain roles and responsibilities of the Bureau to other regulators, they see the CFPB as one that was created in the scheme of how quickly Congress usually moves, a knee jerk after the world economic collapse, came closer than any of us were comfortable with, and they're wishing to walk that back. Maybe they think they don't need that regulator. I don't know one way or the other, but I'd like to see some signaling, because otherwise, what I know is about to happen is, if in 2028 the White House switches again, then it's gonna be more of the same.
Crazy town again.
Yeah, no, it's that pendulum will go back and forth and back and forth, and the only thing that the pendulum going back and forth brings up inconsistencies and changes that, again, does that mean some of the rules that were kind of being squashed suddenly turn around and say, okay, now not only are they going to be reinforced, they're going to be enforced at a harsher level than what we wanted before. So
Well, Steve, another thing is, if the White House doesn't switch in 2028 and it stays the same, and we're still not having enforcement in any sort of robust way, I fear that we end up back in the environment where we're so over leveraged that, and there are people that are making that noise right now in certain markets about, is there a bubble? I hear it in subprime auto. I've heard it in student loans. I'm starting to hear chitter chatter in mortgage. We have to have some oversight to make sure that really smart entrepreneurial people who are trying to make money don't get ahead of themselves too much, right?
exactly,
But we also do need to find an equilibrium where really smart entrepreneurial people can experiment and make money. I mean, one of the things in preparing for today and thinking about AI, I mean, it is, and reading some of the articles that have been put out there, it is just such an essential part of the future, right? And I always say, until it kills us, right? We've all seen the movies. But until then, I mean, there's so much utility, not just for the industry. There's utility for consumers. You can actually end up having approaches that are more consistently aligned with the proliferation of state rules, requirements, disclosures, protections. That's a really hard thing to keep track of. Trust me. I know others on the call or on the podcast know too. That's why we do 50 state surveys, and you're trying to figure out what they are, and you're trying to identify all the states that are different ways. You're trying to build these models. AI can do that faster. They can track it faster. There's so much utility that actually will protect consumers. That's a place where we need to allow for some innovation. We need to allow for some, when you hear the Massachusetts AG and others come out and say, it's fine, experiment, but we'll show you no quarter, not a direct quote, but might as well be, right? That doesn't make me feel comfortable, at least experimenting in Massachusetts or California or whatever. And that's fine. Those states can make a choice to not have that used there. But I will tell you, I see so much upside for consumer protection not just in the collection space, but across the financial services industry with AI. Now, that doesn't mean we just set it loose, but that's a place where we need some flexibility. We need a little room. We need, dare I say, some sandboxes, although the sandboxes weren't as great as you, but we need some sort of, I like Joanne, adults in the room that'll say, all right, like, we're going to give you a little way here. Maybe don't roll it out nationwide, but let's see if we can build some data. The data is showing that customers, especially in the collection space, prefer AI to a person.
Exactly.
But we can't go too far the other way and just ignore the rules, or we could
Right.
end up in a really dangerous situation again.
You've Stephanie, you've transitioned really well into the next hot topic. So thank you. I didn't have to do that. I just kind of sat back and let you do it. So I'm gonna let you take over to do that. But AI is it the next greatest thing? And what about compliance, and what about regulations, and what about, all the forks in the road that we're gonna do that? So I'm gonna kind of switch the topic over to AI, because now it's I think we've beat the CFP PB over the head a few times, and that's kind of where it is. But is artificial intelligence changing the debt collection industry, and how is it changing it? What is the new role of AI in debt collections? Um, is there a systemic AI? Is that going to overall change the collection industry? And what innovations are there that can do this? And what are the states and all that going to do about this? If the CFPB is not going to regulate it, the states will. And like John's mentioned earlier, um, you have a lot of regulators, heavy duty regulators, that have switched from the federal regulation to, let's say, New York or Massachusetts or Colorado, or of course California. Um, so where are we going to go with that? And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of open that up to the group. And I know, Rob, you've been a little bit
Yeah.
quiet on the compliance stuff with the CFPB, but talk about AI a little bit from your perspective. Then again, we're going to run through the group and talk about AI and where this monster's going.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, this is where I start to clear my throat, stretch my legs, because this is the topic that's the most near and dear to my heart. I'm more of the observer, the fly on the wall, and the regulatory stuff. Um, but yeah, here at CSS Impact, I'm fairly new here, doing the business development thing, but we are a very AI forward, very AI advocate, right, with our platform and with just our stance and the way that we approach just doing work even, right? If I'm uh, coding something, or if we're going to write a I don't know, a SQL statement or something like that, I could spend 5 minutes hacking at it, or I can have my AI helper help me hack that out. So we've built into our platform like four AI assistant tools. One of them that I think I'll save the most controversial one for last, because I know that voice bots are a hotter topic. But when it comes to what you can use AI for, and where the safest places to apply AI tend to be without raising a lot of hackles for regulators and attorneys and whatnot and consumers, is internally. So things like we have our AI co-pilot, that this is like right from the collect screen. If you can imagine, you're looking at an account, and you're a trainee right out of training, and you are on the phone with a consumer, and they're saying something about bankruptcy, and you remember there's something in training that had to do with bankruptcy, and you're supposed to do something to that account at that point. So rather than like raise your hand and ask a supervisor, hey, something about bankruptcy going on, you open up the Copilot chat window, tell it, hey, the consumer just said something about bankruptcy. What do I do? Or, I need to mark this up as bankruptcy. And then it can even take over and start notating the account. It can perform an action code for you, or it can give verbal, written feedback rather, over there inside of the Copilot panel. So that for us, that's one of my favorite really AI tools that we've adopted. It's really hard for regulator to, if we worry about regulators and like, well, is this okay? Is this legal? Because it's our tool and it's kind of built in, it's not quite so worrisome. Same thing with our any calls coming through our platform. We have this AI. You can imagine like a punch list on the side. Make sure that you say the call recording disclosure and the mini Miranda. And then again, when that bankruptcy call happens, because the AI is listening, right? It's prompting. Make sure that you get the case number and the chapter date filed. And then the back end, we have the AI Copilot for the back office, where you can ask questions about your data, and then of course, as I teased earlier, the voice bot. So so I think that's that voice bot technology. Of course, we have a voice agent, and it sounds like most people are uh, starting with inbound first, because with outbound you have to worry about, do you have that permission? Do you, and even if you inherit it from your client, are they tracking revocation of that and notifying you when permission is revoked? Even if they have it on their intake papers or something like that. So inbound calls tend to be the safest play for a voice bot. I see John's nodding. I want to hear your take on voice bots.
Oh, no, I was gonna say what you've said up to date, Rob, is probably the most grounded, makes sense statement about AI I've heard from a vendor in the space in a long time. That's exactly the approach, is to get used to AI, and start using it in ways that don't necessarily expose the consumer to it. Again, I'm gonna go on and on about data governance. Make sure the data you're using is data that you have a permissible reason to have, and that hasn't gone out of control. Because I see too many, and this goes back to the earliest presentations and talking to markets people about AI back when Doug Merrill was starting out Zest, is that was a fear he had too, is people would just glom data from wherever, put it into their systems and output, but you seem to be using it safely, responsibly. I'm excited about the compliance applications of AI, where you literally could have streaming data fed into your AI model. You could have all that data in memory, and you're looking for variances. Did this collector talk to a consumer longer than is usual? They usually talk to consumers for 3.5 minutes on their initial contact, but this one they talked to 6 or 1. And then pumping in the basically sentiment analysis, all those other things to engage in a compliant fashion. And I think for banks and lending, where somebody is able to look at all that data, chew it up really fast, in real time, looking for anything that looks like an aberration that may signal a problem. And all those are like smoke detectors. When they go off, take a look. So I'm excited for the application in that way, but I'm also skeptical. I'm not a huge, you asked me about outbound AI. Yeah, you've got this really troublesome um, consent requirement that's needed. And then you're trusting that the creditor client or the hospital client has told you whether or not it was revoked, or they even follow it. Because again, if you're a medical debt collector, you all know this. I was once one. Like, they care about HIPAA. My favorite story is an agency owner up in the Northwest told me over a beer that he invites his clients to a HIPAA seminar, and then he ambushes them with FDCPA when they get there, because he knows if he was trying to get them to come in for FDCPA, it's not a top of the thing for healthcare providers. So I think that's good. And then, I mean, maybe I'm overly snarky, but I think I think the only thing debtors and consumers want to hear from less than your collectors are probably your AI collectors, and that's why. And I could be proven wrong. That's why I'm generally not a fan of outbound AI.
Well, we've seen surveys. It's some surprising results on surveys. I think um, there's going to be some new reports coming out that also support this. That consumers are the opt-out rates for, because you want to give them that option. You have to say, like, if you don't want to talk to our voice bot, then just let me know and we'll transfer you over to a human, or take a message if the human's not available. The opt-out rates are surprisingly low.
And I like the fact that you're telling the human, the patient, or the consumer that it is an AI application, like leading.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anyone that tries to hide that fact, because there's some good voices out there that don't sound like bot. They have emotion. Yeah,
Yeah, I think Joe Biden called me 4 different times last week, selling me some stuff. So therefore, yeah, I'm getting.
That sounded like him too, right? Yeah.
No, but I couldn't agree more with the be upfront about it, give the disclosure and the opt-out. And I have some people, and I understand why. I have some people pushing back and just, not saying no, but wanting to understand, well, is it required? And at this point, not really outside of 1 or 2 states in this industry, but I see a lot of utility in it. Number 1, as somebody who doesn't personally like dealing with, non-humans, I ended up dealing with some non-humans and it worked out great. It's been efficient. It's been great. I think that's partially because the technologies are getting better. They're a lot less like an IVR. But number 2, if we're being upfront proactively, perhaps that'll quell 50 states thinking they need to tell us how to do it, plus the federal government maybe, but telling us how to do it in different ways, right? Maybe we'll have a little less of that. But lastly, it's getting you this buy-in at the same time that it is protecting you from TCPA issues. Like there's so much utility from being upfront about it. The concerns I hear is they're afraid they won't get the buy-in from the consumer. They probably invested a lot of money and time in building or integrating these technologies. But Rob, same thing. I'm actually hearing from clients the opposite. Maybe in the beginning it was a little slow uptake, but there's a lot of pickup. And I think that's being driven by the fact that AI outside the collections world is being used a lot. That's how I've ended up using it. And the more that you're like, oh, well, actually it worked here. Let me at least give it a shot here, or in this context, we're going to just see more and more buy into it. So, I mean, I will say it again. Whether you're required by law or not to make the disclosure about AI, I see so much upside through many, many different practical and legal and compliance channels to just doing it. And I think ultimately it's going to result in more uptake by your customers. I'm a big fan of it.
It's almost like there's I'm hearing about AI usage mandates in places, in like the government, the Doge thing, like they had their AI tool, and the administration said we are mandating that we go through all of these legacy of acts, and we scrape it for information and have the AI help us to wipe out laws or whatnot. That's maybe an extreme case, but even in development shops, I'm hearing like developers are being told like you must have at least 50% of your code written by AI, because the managers know that if the developers are just hand coding everything like they had been for the last, for their entire career, that they're wasting time. There's so much time savings in having your coding done by a bot, that anyone that hasn't learned how to work with that bot, they're wasting time. I've also heard about, like, in healthcare, that there's a mandate that healthcare starts adopting and using AI to an extent that they're not today.
This could be a personal preference, it's kind of hard to say. Would you rather talk to one of my collectors, or would you rather talk to a fake one of my collectors who announces that they're a fake one of my collectors? I really think consumers want to deal asynchronously about their debts, meaning they don't want to have a real-time conversation. If they have a chance to have a real-time conversation as instead of just chatting or using text or email to get it done, I think they're going to go with that option, because again, it doesn't come into their private time. It doesn't force them to be in the present. And with that, I'll shut up. Joanne, you were about to say something way more insightful.
Well, no, absolutely
I
not.
set a low bar.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge, I mean, everything you all are saying is 100% correct. And this thing is moving at the most lightning speed like I've never seen. I mean, I think the last time I saw something take off so much was whether we're going to use text or email, and all of a sudden that rock was rolling down the hill pretty quickly, especially after Reg F. But this AI thing is changing. I mean, we're going to get off this call and there's going to be some other aspect to it that has changed. It's going so fast. But the challenge, I think, is going to be is what we're seeing right now is, what is the path that we take? You're talking about all these great developments, and Rob, you're talking about, companies are going to want AI to take over code. Well, look at some of the state laws that are coming out around AI, especially in California, and they are directed at developers. Until we get everybody's going to be going in 10 different directions until we get some consistency as to what direction we should all be going, which, I'm going to put on my preemption hat right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. Again, and I'm going back to my theme of this whole webinar is where are the adults in the room? We're going to need a national policy on AI. We're starting to see it in certain industries. We're not seeing it in financial services at all, zero. And until we have the administration right now saying, well, we're gonna direct DOJ to challenge some of these state laws. Well, that's just kind of an executive order and a policy. That's not going to happen anytime soon. States like Texas, of all places, are enacting kind of strict AI laws about what developers can do and how you're going to interact with consumers, which is really going to impact the innovation that Stephanie is talking about, which is happening at a lightning speed. And I think we all have to kind of look at that. I mean, I dare I say put the brakes on, but it's going to be really challenging, and certainly from an institutional investment perspective of wanting to invest in a certain type of AI product that 3 months from now, you could have a state come out and say, you can't do that the way the AI is laying it out. So we have a big challenge ahead of us, not only in this industry, but others, of how we're going to use AI and in what ways, because states and or the federal government could restrict that. I am super bullish on AI. I think AI can be terrific for all the reasons that everybody has said. And I've looked at it a lot on the compliance end, and I think it is a game changer for compliance. It is going to streamline auditing and the type of and the human capital that you're going to have to put in for auditing. It's going to benefit my clients, who the service providers' clients, very much so. And I think we should be investing in that. But until we get some consistency on what the law and what the expectation of regulators are going to be, we have a big challenge ahead of us. And there's going to be a lot of wasted resources in these developments that could actually be cut off at the knees. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's how I'm seeing
this could be a big breach, maybe something that wakes everybody up and they say, uh-oh, there's
I mean, look, AI is being fueled by private equity and by institutional investment. And the minute private equity sees that I'm not getting an ROI from this investment, because the minute I put the money in, some regulator or laws being enacted that says I can't do that anymore, that's going to be a challenge. Right now, we're not there yet, but there is definitely a push and pull right now between the federal and the states of how they're going to regulate AI. And that is really going to, I think, explode next year. I think the federal government is laying the groundwork on that, and states are then those states are ramping up. It doesn't matter which state. Again, Texas has a pretty significant AI law right now, although they have a sandbox, which I think is great. How many people will join the sandbox? I don't know. But that's really, to me, where the challenge is going to be in the next 12 to 18 months, in figuring out where the right investment, where something can flourish, where the innovation can actually flourish without getting cut off at the knees.
And you're making a great point, Joanne, that I think everybody needs to be aware of and just, realize this, that red states are more populous now. Like, it's not necessarily red and blue. I mean, they're when it comes to being populist, the appeal is different, and especially when it comes to things like debt collections, debt buying, debt sales, and attorney litigation of debts. So again, Utah's done some things too that are like, wow, that's Utah. Very, very different. And I mean, let's face it, we got Ken Paxton agreeing with the CFPB career staff that you can't cut funding off because that's a ridiculous argument that the Fed doesn't make money. It feels like, and again, I'm a big fan of this book that Tim Collins recommended called Co-Intelligence, I think by Ethan Mollick. But one of the tenets is invite AI to the party. And if you're not using like AI in your personal lives to sort of give you a sense of the realm of the possible, you're making a big, big, big mistake. And again, I highly encourage you to use the Pro Edition so that your data isn't used or it isn't escaping out into the wild.
Agreed. I'm gonna go ahead, and because we're looking at about an hour into this, and we could go on for days to do it. I'm not sure anybody would want to watch a podcast for days, but this is a great start. I love the concept that we're here, doing this, and I'm going to give everyone a chance to kind of wrap up, just kind of what we talked about, the CFPB and AI, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this session up on the Credit and Collection News podcast. So, Stephanie, just as a kind of a wrap up, your thoughts on what we talked about for the past hour.
I think we all agree there's a lot of things happening. Um, there's some uncertainty about where to go, but at the end of the day, the future's bright. There are opportunities. Um, we're innovating. We're in an environment where we're going to have, at least at the federal level, I think some room to do that. Um, we just need to be thoughtful and strategic. I'm a fan of AI as well. I share Joanne's optimism. That doesn't mean it's ready to go prime time today, but I hope John reads those studies to see that consumers are liking it more, since he mentioned a little anxiety around that. But I'm excited for it. I think 2026 is going to be a year with a lot of really great upside.
I think the CFPB will still be around. It will be safer if it's around in the next 3 years at about a bigger staffing level, 5 or 600. That'll blunt some of the instincts of a democratic regime to come in and, again, as I said earlier, go womping and womping, and hoping for anything that steers it back to a no responsible business can run with these radical swings. They can't run profitably like that. They can't draw investment dollars. It's no way to live. And again, my true north when I joined the Bureau is consumers benefit when responsible providers know the rules of the road. Clearly, they might not always like them, but minimizing uncertainty is key for that. When it comes to AI, I've been using the pro version of Gemini for well over a year. I'm a big fan of it. I'm excited about it. Um, I'm a little bit of a curmudgeon though, Rob, when it comes to outbound voice AI. I just don't think debtors want to talk to collectors anymore, whether they're real or not. I think they'd rather deal with them asynchronously, on their own terms, on their own times, via, say, chatbots or via email or SMS. And that's about it.
Joanne?
Um, agree with my colleagues, all of them. I think a little bit of forewarning, and I'm sure Stephanie is seeing this daily. The states are here. Beware of the states. I agree the CFPB is not going away, but I think we're still in this kind of pattern of what they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And on any given day, we'll figure that out. But the states are very real. We're seeing tons of enforcement, supervision, problems with licensing, and it doesn't really matter the state. They're all kind of a little loopy right now. They're also, to the point that I made before, they're all kind of grappling with AI, like they don't understand what it means. So if they are coming in and doing an examination of your organization, you better be able to, and you are using AI, you better be able to explain it to them in a way that they can understand, because the minute they don't, it's a problem. So I guess that's another topic for another webinar, Steve. But thank you so much, and it was really great being with all of you today.
Well, that'll be part 2. So yeah, you guys just committed to that. You didn't even know that.
Oh, okay.
So there you have it. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. I'll springboard off of Joanne's final thoughts on being able to explain your AI. I think knowing your tool set maybe more deeply than you just the superficial, like, well, I'm using it, so I guess we're all good here. Actually dig into how your data is being used. Ask the hard questions of your vendors as to where and how it's secured. We didn't have a chance to talk about the OpenAI breach, but there was a vendor that OpenAI worked with that had a breach last month. So even working with the big dogs doesn't necessarily mean that everything's protected, but read that to get more information. But with the regulatory stuff, yeah, it's these guys have more informed things to say about it. From the sidelines here, though, it's certainly this political game that just keeps on being played with the Liebenbach. That this is just kind of a retoll the bell of the current stand-in with the what was the other one? The Department of Justice having us run out of funding and shifting all the enforcement over to the DOJ. It's hard to parse how much is true, how much is real about what's being said, and how much is just hyperbole. So we'll keep watching Steve's articles to try to make sense of it, and we'll be back again next month with any luck with this crew to talk about what happens in December. Looking forward to that.
That's for sure. Thank you, everyone. John, Rob, Joanne, and Stephanie for taking the time. We appreciate it. Like I said, these two topics are hot. They're there. Joanne opened up the can of the states, and that's, you got 50 states, you got territories, that's a lot of AGs that are out there that are like, hey, you know what? They see the opportunity, and states are always looking for more financing and more money. And if they can pick up the money through lawsuits and rules and regs and all that stuff, they're going to do it. So if the feds aren't doing it, the states are going to jump in there. And, we talked about it. A lot of the CFPB personnel are now working for the states. And if they're working from the states, they took a lot of information with them. So therefore, that's a whole new path. I do want to thank, like I said, our panelists for coming here. I'd love to have you guys all back and talk some more, because this is phenomenal information. Also want to thank CSS Impact for sponsoring the Credit and Collection News podcast. I like the format. I like the new concept. I think this works really well. And with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. And I wish you guys all a safe holiday season. Hope your Thanksgivings were wonderful, and your holiday season will be just as wonderful. With that, we will see everybody next month, and we'll go from there. Thank you, everybody.